Good afternoon guys, Dark Purple Shadow here, and today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite buzzword when it comes to gaming, which is ray tracing, RTX, you name it, we're going to talk about it. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the path tracing that is kind of available in the two games I'm going to be using to kind of personify my experience with path tracing. Now, ray tracing is a technology that allows you to see light and allows light to be rendered in video games, and it's effectively a very modern way of developing things like bloom. You know, that ethereal glow you have when you're playing a game, you see the glowing kind of objects. That's what ray tracing is. It also is the light rays themselves. It also is how light moves within an environment. It's basically simulating light. Path tracing theoretically simulates the paths of the light as they move out of an object to a different area, and it tries to give you a very realistic image of how light would look in a real environment. And actually, Cyberpunk does this really well when it comes to settings. It does look really good. Now, I played most of Cyberpunk personally on a GTX 1080. I haven't finished the game yet. I've taken my time with it. I've taken a few breaks here and there. And with my new graphics card, obviously the performance is night and day, but that's mainly in terms of how it runs. In terms of the graphics, they have been a big improvement, but has it been the end of the world? Have I changed my whole view on existence? Have I decided to, write a book about it? Probably not. Ray tracing is really cool. In Indiana Jones, I think the actual implementation is absolutely amazing. A lot of the kind of vistas in Indiana Jones, the settings, they look photorealistic throughout the entire time you play the game. All of the settings you visit literally look like they could be on a postcard, and they look realistic. They don't look like it's generated imagery. It literally looks like the real thing. So that's one thing I will say. Indiana Jones does a really good job of it. Now, comparing that to Cyberpunk is also doing a good job, but we have to remember that this game is about 5 years older than the Indiana Jones Great Circle game, and for all intents and purposes, Cyberpunk is relatively outdated in this day and age. I know the most recent updates only stopped last year, so actually in its current form this game is about a year and a half old or a year old. That being said, the kind of baseline technology of Cyberpunk is from 2020, and the game is out, I wouldn't say out of date, but it is kind of past its prime. So playing this game, you have to take that into consideration and treat it as such. That being said, the path tracing, the graphics, everything does look amazing. Now, personally, as somebody who, I'm not really a graphics snob. The reason why I kind of build PCs, or you enjoy my PC, is kind of like a kind of a promise to myself that all the stuff I didn't have when I was younger, I'm gonna make sure that I try and get that for myself as I get older. In reality, has it changed my life to see a few more shiny bits, shiny puddles in Cyberpunk? No. Does it live up to the hype in terms of, does it look good? Yes, in some ways it does look good. It is superior to not having ray tracing, but are you missing out on much if you turn off ray tracing? No, you aren't. Ultimately, the best parts of that game kind of exist mutually exclusively to the ray tracing elements of it. The ray tracing itself is supplemental. It doesn't make or break the game. Now, Indiana Jones, on the other hand, I'd say is very different. Indiana Jones really does benefit from that path tracing, and maybe it's because I've played this game on these kind of super hyper settings from the get-go, but I'll be honest, Indiana Jones is one of the best looking things I've seen on a computer, period. It is absolutely stunning. And a little bit of background, my current setup might be great with a 5080 and a 9800 X3D. However, my monitor is the same monitor I used to use in my old system, because I didn't really buy a new monitor when I upgraded my PC. It is something I'm looking to do. And actually, my monitor is a 1440p Acer monitor. It's not a high spec monitor. It has a high refresh rate, but honestly, the monitor's mid as hell. I'm grateful that it works and it does look alright, but in reality, it's probably not doing justice to all of that fancy ray tracing and all of that kind of jazz. Realistically, what I'm seeing is my monitor is effectively limiting the ability of my PC to generate these frames in a way that I'm not able to perceive how good the quality is. That's kind of how I'd put it. Now, my monitor also has this weird HDR mode that makes everything kind of look worse somehow. I don't think it's proper HDR. I think it's some sort of DLSS version of HDR, where it's kind of like a fake HDR and makes you think you're kind of using HDR, but that's not the case. That being said, even with this kind of limitation, the ray tracing does look good in Cyberpunk. But like I said, it's not the be all end all. You can genuinely enjoy this game without all of the puddles looking shiny. Now, Indiana Jones, I will kind of stick to my guns and say that game really does benefit from the super hyper fidelity you get from having a better system, having the settings cranked up. But that game is also newer, far more demanding, and a lot of people cannot even run that game because the RTX monopoly has come into full swing. My GTX 1080 in theory probably did have the ability to run Indiana Jones, but as far as I'm aware, without some sort of hack, you can't even get the game to start up without an RTX enabled GPU. I think personally that is quite silly. Now, how do you know if ray tracing is working? Well, when ray tracing works, things, especially things to do with light, like shadows and illumination, just looks very genuine and looks realistic, and it pops. And honestly, this kind of map that I'm playing in Indiana Jones really encapsulates this. A big part of it is kind of scaring away these scorpions with a fire torch, and you can really see how good the torch looks when you're doing this. Now, I'll be honest, is YouTube going to compress this video to holy hell and minimize the benefits of having this kind of ray tracing occurring? To some degree, yes. Now, hardware side ray tracing itself is interesting because it's not the only way to do the job. You can do kind of rendered ray tracing, where you don't actually need ray tracing hardware to mimic the kind of look of ray tracing. Now, none of these kind of workarounds are ever as good as the original thing, so just bear that in mind. When it comes to both Cyberpunk and Indiana Jones, I think to some degree the games are elevated by ray tracing. But like I said, it is a very underwhelming thing. When you hear about it, you feel like it's going to change your life. It's not going to change your life. If you're in my position and you're looking to upgrade, do it. But don't feel like that once you upgrade, everything will just look 10 million times better and run like the wind. The truth is, a lot of the issues with modern games go beyond ray tracing. They're to do with optimization. They're to do with tight deadlines, shareholders, and all of that kind of stuff. I'm kind of waffling a bit, but the truth is, there's a lot that goes into video games. And actually, just because a game is kind of just because a game is using ray tracing doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have superior graphics or it will look amazing. There are limitations to this technology as well, and obviously path tracing and ray tracing do give your hardware a massive aneurysm. Things just won't work as well, in the sense that your frames will drop, things won't look as good as you'd expect them to look, and you might need to stick on frame gen, or you definitely probably need to stick on DLSS. Now, it is kind of frustrating that the third best graphics card money can buy right now pretty much can't really path trace natively at 1440p. Well, I can in reality, but I'm not going to be wanting to play this at sub 60 frames per second. It's just not going to happen. Not because I need the frames, but because higher frame rate usually just means more stability and little things in the game just work better. Now, to wrap this entire kind of video up, let me just tell you kind of a rundown of my personal opinion of ray tracing. Ray tracing / path tracing does look good. It does improve a game that already is good. It won't make up for poor graphics to begin with, because essentially you're not changing any of the assets in the game. You're just rendering the light around the assets, and then you can see in this corridor, it almost looks real as to how the light's bouncing off the floors and the walls. That is in essence what ray tracing is. Now, personally, I will like to tell you that it's not worth the hype. You're not losing out without it. If you can afford to run ray tracing games, path tracing games, do it. It is an upgrade, but is it night and day? No. I'm somebody who, as much as I like graphics, it's always been about the gameplay for me. I don't mind playing a 2D stickman game if it got some good progression, like Brotato, for example. But with these sort of games, when they look this realistic, you gotta give it to them. Peace.